Hi guys! So today we're gonna create this gorgeous denim top. It's made of old jeans and I also used up some lace and borders. We're gonna wing it a little bit, so it's gonna be a lot of fun. So let's jump right into this. The sewing pattern that I have used for our today's project was an old bodice sewing pattern I had at home. It was from an old border magazine. I made a few adjustments, which I will explain in a second. You can work with pretty much any bodice pattern for this or a princess cut sewing pattern. And I will create a sewing pattern for this top in future. It will be up in my Etsy shop, so you can follow my Etsy shop. It's linked down below, and chances are if you're watching this video in future that the pattern might be already there. I simply didn't have the time recently, and I really wanted to film this tutorial still in the summer. So anyway, let's have a look at the adjustments that I made to the bodice sewing pattern I had at home. So here I have the envelope. It's been a sewing pattern from a border magazine from September 2006. And the number of the sewing pattern was 133. And here you have a sketch. I always do that on the envelopes with my sewing patterns. So it goes a little bit over the waist, and the original sewing pattern also had ruffle around the top, and there's been a zipper on the side, or you could make a zipper in the back. And it says that I would need 1/2 meter of the fabric for this one. And here we have the sewing pattern pieces. So I have here the center piece for the front part and the side piece for the front part, and here I have the center piece for the back part and the side piece for the back part. And you can see there are these numbers so that I know how to align the sewing pattern, so that made it really easy. And I have here also these marks. So these marks are for the waist, and I wanted this top to be cropped, and I knew I wanted to go a little bit more than an inch over the waist. So the first adjustment that I did was to fold the pattern above these marks upwards, like so. And this is a little bit wider, so I also folded it in, and I did that on each piece so that I would have the same length everywhere. Now I have the first adjustment, which is the length. I also folded this rounded part on the side piece for the front part a little bit in, because I'm very flat chested. But if you have regular boobs or rather larger boobs, leave it alone, or make it even a little bit more rounded on both sides so that it would match your body. Now this piece goes normally on folded fabric, because this is the very center on the front part, but this is gonna be a lace up bodice, so I had to account for seam allowance also here. So this sewing pattern doesn't have seam allowance, so I had to add seam allowance around all edges here on the center piece for the front part, around all edges, around the side piece for the front part, also around all edges of the side piece for the back part. And here, when it comes to the center part, it will depend on how much fabric you have, how big pieces can you use, especially if you're upcycling jeans. If you have only small pieces, then add seam allowance around all edges, and then you'll have a seam here in the very center of the back. If, like me, you will have a large piece that will be big enough for this part, then place this edge on the fold of the fabric, and then you will add seam allowance only on the bottom, on the side, and on the top. Now this bodice sewing pattern has kind of a sweetheart shape, so it goes a little bit in. But if you have a different sewing pattern, you can simply adjust the top, because I could make this straight if I wanted to, or I could make it, I don't know, even go up in the front if that would be what I wanted. This is where you have to just play with it and do whatever looks good to you. I thought that the sweetheart shape looked nice, so I left it that way. And this is basically how you can adjust any bodice pattern that you're working with. One more thing, I will be explaining during this tutorial how to take the bodice in case something doesn't fit properly. I will be taking it in here on this side, so definitely make sure you watch the entire video. Here we have all the parts for the strappy top, plus some of the things I'm gonna use for embellishment and some other tools and gadgets and whatnot. So let's start with the parts for the top itself. These two pieces are for the center of the front part. The rounded side will align with the side part, and this shorter line, this shorter edge, is for the center. And I will have here a line of grommets on each side because it's gonna be a lace up top, and that is why I have ironed on each edge a strip of really sturdy iron-on interfacing to fortify the fabric for the grommets. And then I have here two corresponding pieces of lining. This is just a cotton fabric. I'm using this one up. I had a few scraps and they just needed to go. This is the side part for the front part. No explanation necessary. Two corresponding pieces made of the lining. Then I have here the side part for the back part. The higher side aligns with the side part of the front part, and I have here again two corresponding pieces of lining. Now this is the center piece for the back part. It should be actually two pieces, but I have used a piece of jeans that already had a seam, so I don't have to sew these together. And these are made of really stretchy denim. That will make the top really comfortable, and that is why there won't be any lining, because this cotton fabric is not stretchy. So I will simply sew it in like so. I already folded the edges over, and I'll go through with my cover lock. It's gonna give in a little bit on the back, and I love it while we're wearing. Then I have here this thing. This is gonna be for the strap. It's nothing else than a bias tape I made myself using one of these forms. I already covered how to make your own bias tape in one of my recent videos, so I'll link it down below. And what I did was I grabbed the bias tape and one of these borders, and I simply pinned the border in. And I made sure that these pointy edges would stick out, and that's gonna be for my straps. So each strap will have this border on the side, and that's gonna look really pretty. I have here a few pieces for denim feathers. I also already covered how to make denim feathers in one of my recent videos. It's linked down below. What I want to have is something like this, like a group of feathers, and it's gonna go always here in the center on each side of the front part. It's gonna be where the straps will go out. And I will probably add some beads. So I have here these wooden beads in this size, and then a little bit smaller beads. I don't know how I'm gonna do that yet. I might even skip that, but that's the plan, at least at this point. And then I have here these borders. So I wanna use up at least a little bit of this one. So my plan is to have the border sew in like so, and also on the other side. And when the pieces are going to be sewn together, it's gonna be like a one thick strip. Then I want to have this border on the front part right before the grommets will start, and next to it I will have this border. It's gonna look something like so. And then I was thinking about making a few strips of this border on the side, and I will probably add this one too, so it's gonna be looking like something like this. Don't know yet. Again, we're winging this. Then I have here these grommets. I have them in several colors, but I'm gonna use the brassy ones. I'll probably have 7 grommets on each side of the front part. For the grommets, I'm gonna be using these pliers. I recently bought them. They have a part that punches in holes. And last but not least, I have here this cord. This is polyester, which makes it really convenient because when you chop off the end, all you have to do is to cinch the end. Just be careful, don't burn your fingers. When you feel like it's cool enough, you can form it a little bit, and here you go. Important thing is you have to check that it goes easily through your grommets. You don't want to have any surprises. I tried to make a cord of denim for lacing up of this top, but that was just too thick to go through the grommets, and then I thought, why am I torturing myself? I can just buy a cord that would match the color of all the embellishments that I'm using, and here we go. I started pinning the white lace to the centerpiece for the front part, like so. For the time being, I kept the pins at an angle, and then I folded the lace over upwards like so, and I aligned the sections of the lace that created the pattern so that everything would be symmetrical once I was done. Next, I aligned the side piece for the front part with the center piece, and I kept pulling out the pins of the lace, and I've been pinning along the edge like so. For the time being, I didn't bother laying the lace out flat because first I wanted to sew it into the seam, and I would lay it out flat like so later. And then I took one of the beige borders and placed it close to the center edge, but I kept in mind that I needed place for seam allowance and that I would have a row of eyelets later. Once the border was pinned in place, I grabbed the beige lace and I pinned it close to the border like so. And then I started positioning a few rows of both the border and the lace on the side piece for the front part. I played with it a little bit until I had what I thought looked the best. I didn't pin it all the way to the seam because later when I would unfold the lace that was sewn into the piece, that will be covered, so there was no need to go that close. Also, since I didn't go all the way to the seam, I made sure that the seam wouldn't be too bulky. As a next step, I started making little cuts on the edges to mark where I needed to place the lace and the border on the other side for the front part. And once I had all my marks, it was really easy to place the border and the lace on the other side. I double-checked the placement once everything has been pinned in before I went to my sewing machine to sew everything in place. I find measuring a couple of times is always best. Before I started sewing the lace and the borders on, I also pinned together all the parts for the lining. Here is what everything looked like once I was done pinning. So here we have the pieces for the lining. Then we have here also the straps, which is the bias tape with the beige lace inside. And here we have again the denim pieces. Here we have the finished front parts. I took them apart again and took this lace out before I have sewn in this border on the side part, and then I pinned everything back in place. It was just much easier. And this is what it looks like from the inside. I folded the seam to both sides out because then it's nicer and flatter. So I have sewn here through the center with stretch zigzag, and then I have sewn around these edges with the stretch zigzag. And the result is really neat now. I have used a light blue thread for my bobbin because I'm using up also some leftover threads. And on the top I've been using beige thread. So when I pinned the straps in, I made sure that both will have the light blue on the inside and the beige thread on the outside. So these are these pieces, and then here we have the lining. I have sewn everything just with straight stitch, and then of course I pressed all parts before I started putting everything else together. Now I can pin in place the side parts.
I pinned both pieces in. When I was done, the piece looked like this, and then I have sewn the pieces in with straight stitch and I pressed the seams, and then I went ahead and I pinned in the back part, the center piece, so that I could try the top on. I put the top on inside out. I overlapped the center pieces ever so slightly and put pins in, and then I noticed that I needed to take the top in a little bit, so I started putting in pins on the sides, and when I was sure that that was the right fit, I turned it to the right side, put it on again just to be sure, and then I knew how much I needed to take it in.
Now let's talk about taking in princess cut pieces. It's ideal if you take in only by about 1 centimeter. This is almost 2 centimeters, and you can tell that when I unfold it, it changes the shape and I will have to cut back the fabric here. In such case, it's actually better to say, okay, I need to take 2 centimeters on each side, to divide the amount that you have to take in into 2 seams. So I would, for example, take in the seam here by 1 centimeter and here only by 1 centimeter, which would give me 2 centimeters in total. Let me unfold this when I go a little bit in, and the shape wouldn't change so much. In my case, I don't mind because I can just round it here and I'll keep the back as it is. But keep that in mind when you're taking in pieces. And of course, I will also take in the pieces of the lining before I proceed.
I aligned both sides and pinned them together so that I could cut off the excess fabric, and then I was sure that I cut off the same amount on each side. I also cut back the top edge on one side, and then I used it for reference for the other side so that everything would be symmetrical. I put the top on just to be sure that everything was as I wanted before I started adjusting the lining. I used the denim pieces for reference to know how much to cut off on the lining, and I made sure that I would cut back the same amount on each side. I also double checked that the sides were equally long.
So here we have all parts. I have here the lining, I have here the middle piece for the back. Of course, when I was sewing through with the cover stitch, the thread got tangled, so I messed up the stitches, so they don't necessarily look neat, but that's fine. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna put this part on one of the front pieces like so. I'm gonna pin it in at an angle for the time being. And then I'm gonna put the lining over it. I'll take the pin out and pin at an angle again. And here I do the same. All right, now I will start pinning the edge because now it's being held in place perfectly. And I'll keep pinning the rest of the lining. I will make sure that I will not sew through the edge of the back part. Ideally, you would fold it in like so, so that you and pin it in place so that you can't accidentally sew through the edges. And I'm also gonna tuck in the strap, and I'll just keep pinning around the entire edge, but I will leave a small section open on the bottom so that I can turn the piece to the right side.
I decided I would be pinning from the denim side because I find that sewing around the edge is a little bit easier, since I could see the line of the seam better to make sure that everything is nicely straight, whereas in the pattern it kind of disappears. And when everything was pinned in place, I also cut back the top edge of the lining. I've sewn the pieces together with straight stitch, and then I cut the edge a little bit back with zigzag scissors closer to the seam, because later when I would sew through the edge, once I turned the piece, the edge wouldn't be too bulky. As a next step, I turned the piece to the right side, and when it was turned to the right side, I started rolling the edges to shape them nicely, and then I grabbed a pen for everything that needed to be kind of pointy, and then I started pinning around the edge. And once that was done, I went to my sewing machine and I have sewn around the edge with straight stitch. And then it was time to take care of the other side. So first I pinned together the back pieces, and then I placed in the lining. I put in a few pins around the edge, and then I took the rest and tucked it nicely inside, just like I did on the other side, so that it wouldn't be in the way. And then I simply kept pinning around the edges. I made sure there would be one section on the bottom open so that I could turn the piece to the right side, and also I went in from the denim side because, as I mentioned, I find it easier to sew like that. And here it is. It was a little bit bulkier, but it was no problem to sew around the edges with straight stitch. Just like on the other side, I cut back the edge with zigzag scissors. There was one section where the strap has been sewn in. That's where I had to take regular scissors because it was just too thick to go over with the zigzag scissors, but I used them for the remaining edges. I only did not cut back the section that stayed open. And then I turned the piece to the right side, and I double checked that all seams were the same length on both sides before I started shaping the edges and pinning around the edge. I made a line close to the center edge on one of the pieces, and I marked places for the eyelets. I ended up having 8 eyelets on each side. So I grabbed the pliers that I have shown you at the beginning, and I punched in holes on this side first. When I had all my holes, I aligned the pieces like so, and I took a pen and I made marks through the holes on the other side. And then I punched in holes on the other side of the top. Then I took these nifty pliers for eyelets, and I started putting in the eyelets and closing them with the pliers, which is my favorite way how to do it. No hammering necessary, it's just much quieter and faster. I cut a piece of the cord that I wanted to use for my top. It ended up being pretty long since I had that many eyelets. It was, I believe, 1 meter 60. I pinned the straps only in for the time being because I wanted to try the top on first to make sure that the length would be correct.
Alright, so I am finished so far. I really like what it looks like. I feel like I might embellish the back a little bit because I feel like it just doesn't go with the front. There's something missing. So I might add the beige lace. And while I love what it looks like when there are feathers, I think I won't like it all the time. So I'm gonna make kind of like a brooch with a pin in the back for both sides. And that way I can put it on whenever I feel like it and take it off when I feel like I want to have it rather plain. I mean, it's not really plain with all the embellishment, but you know what I mean. This is what I did. I decided to go all in with the same lace and the same borders. I actually finally used up this one that I had for ages, and you clearly see what I did. I also find that since now the back is embellished, it takes away attention from the messed up stitch on the top. And now I will put it on, try again if the length of the straps, the way I have them now, is okay. And if that's the case, I'll just sew them in and we're done.
So here we have an example of how I'm gonna be wearing this top. So I paired it with Max's skirt in a color that matches the pale lace, and I added a silver belt with turquoise stones. I think this is a really cute bohemian look. It gives me Coachella vibes, festival style, but I'll be also wearing it with shorter skirts or with denim shorts. While I was posing for the video, I couldn't help it and made a few turns, and it seemed like my husky had a lot of fun with that, and he approved of the look. Here we have another top I made the same way. So the fabric scraps that I've been using for this one were from my previous tutorial. I extended an IKEA pillow and I just love the fabric so much I thought I would turn it into a top, and here it is. So it's also lace up. I find that the patterns are so cute together, and on the back part I made the center section with shirring, so it's even stretchier and more comfortable.
Alright guys, so that's how I created this gorgeous lace up top. I love upcycling old jeans, it's just so much fun. I find that creating something new of old is so satisfying. I definitely have to check how much I still have in my denim box, if I could maybe create a skirt that would go with this top. If it's gonna be enough, of course I would film that. But not before September because I'm gonna go on vacation soon. But before that, I'll have another sewing video for you guys. So stay tuned, make sure you subscribe to my channel. You can also turn on the notifications. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you very much and see you soon with my next project. Bye!